Welcome to the Trendtracker Strategy Show, the podcast where we explore how AI powered strategic intelligence is reshaping industries. From corporate strategy to the world of sports, today we're diving into the business of football where data, AI, and trend monitoring are crucial competitive advantages. Today's guest is Leander Monbaliu. He's partner, chief business officer at LaSource, a leading sports consulting agency that helps sports organizations innovate and strategize. They've worked with major players like Bundesliga, UEFA Swiss League, and through their collaboration with Trendtracker, they've been at the forefront of integrating AI-powered strategic intelligence into sports strategy. So we'll talk a lot about AI, how it's shaping the future of football, what clubs and leagues can learn from other industries, and the role of strategic intelligence in decision making. So Leander, welcome to the show.
Hi, nice to be here, Vincent.
So Leander, what should listeners definitely know about you?
Oh, so business-wise, I spent over a decade now, I think, working closely with sports leagues, clubs, technology companies, and sport and media organizations, helping them to innovate, transform digitally, and build kind of sustainable business models. I've worked at the Belgian Pro League and now co-own LaSource. And as you said, it's an agency at the crossroads of sports, media, and tech. Then I was born and raised in Ghent. Briefly lived in the Netherlands and in Madrid, but I studied at Ghent University, studying law. So I evolved a bit from being a lawyer at the Belgian Pro League to moving to the business side of things, as I was responsible for media rights. And in sports, media rights is very close to the business. It sits very much at the core of an organization. So that was where I first started working around strategy, new business models, and kind of looking into where the market was headed.
All right, super interesting. Of course, we know each other for quite some while now. I've seen you transition to LaSource, so maybe you can explain a little bit what LaSource is all about, what's their journey, what problems do you solve in football, and how is your work evolving in this age of AI?
Yeah, I joined LaSource 2 years ago. The company exists for 5 years, a little bit more. We celebrated our 5 years anniversary last year. We're based in France, in Paris and Bordeaux. We also have who's in Madrid. I work mainly from Ghent, so we have nice cities to offer to our clients in any case. But so we started back in the days helping technology companies in sports to grow their footprint in Europe. So it was mostly US-based companies. And now, I think 5 years later, we equally work with lots of sports organizations. You named a few. We like to say that we're a bit in the middle between the world of sports, the world of tech, and we translate between those two worlds because we see that often they speak a different language, maybe a different dialect if you wish, but and from a strategic perspective, and related to AI, I think we've increasingly integrated AI to deliver, and together with you guys, to deliver faster, deeper, more actionable insights. But we also work together with technology companies that offer state-of-the-art AI technology to support sports organizations. So, for example, CamBI, which is a speech-to-speech technology, is one of our clients, and together with them, we work with many other leagues as well. So we have on the strategic side, we work with AI, but also on the consultancy side, advising clients that are leveraging AI for their respective clients.
Well, I know you also work a lot with startups, etc., and technology companies. So, do you see that AI is it really accelerating? Do you see more of these startups or technologies that are really changing the football game?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I guess it's on from different angles, right? So sports is, on the one hand you have sports performance, and on the other hand, it's more the business side of things. So when we look at sports performance, obviously it has been helping sports staff to enhance player performance, injury prevention. But then on the other hand, it's also AI has also become very prevalent in the business side of things, fan engagement, localized content, and streamlining operations, optimizing sponsorship valuation. So there's a kind of wide, broad range of applications, I guess, from AI in sports. And we see now, I think, more and more that the more traditional or conservative world of sports is also looking into how can they kind of integrate AI into their operations.
So yeah, we're in the business of AI powered strategic intelligence, basically fusing AI with strategy. We're supportive of corporates, but also consultants. Our collaboration is all about helping companies and leagues to stay competitive with strategic intelligence. Can you explain a little bit how this is supporting their business, not only on the pitch, but actually their operations and their strategy?
Yeah, I mean, sports, I alluded a little bit to it, has been traditionally, I think, dominated by kind of short-term thinking, focusing largely on immediate performance results. And we're still relatively early, I think, in adopting strategic, forward-looking intelligence. So it's still early days, I guess. However, I think it's becoming more and more present because there's an increasing pressure on the traditional business models. We see declining media rights revenues, and fragmented media rights. And I said it before, it's the very core of the business model of sports. And in the past years, leagues, clubs, they were kind of reliant on those steady revenue streams, and they see that those business models are now more under pressure, and it has kind of prompted them to integrate strategic intelligence. And we actually see more and more strategy and innovation departments being established in clubs across Europe. And those teams try to proactively anticipate industry shifts from consumption habits to emerging tech trends. And there's also more and more pressure on these teams, I guess, because they moved from doing innovation. I wouldn't say for the sake of innovation, but it was just there was less pressure on it. Now they really need to come up with clear return on their on investment, creating new business model, diversifying revenues. So with that pressure also comes, I think, the need to look at kind of forecasting and using a more data-driven approach when it comes to forecasting trends in the market.
Mhm. That's really interesting. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit on that. So you say that the maturity in football or even sports organizations for AI-driven strategic intelligence is growing. It's still not as mature probably as in some of these bigger international corporations. How do you foresee the balance between this human intuition, which is typically how strategy was done in the old days, combined or augmented with AI-driven insights, evolving in this decision-making process in footballs? Do you see that the maturity will scale, that they will tap into more of these kinds of insights going forward?
Yeah, I'm sure they will. They will have to, I guess. But I think I can compare it a little bit with what is happening or what has happened on the pitch related to data and insights. I think back in the days, coaches, trainer staff, sporting directors looked at the whole kind of new technology around data as interfering with their kind of gut feeling or their expertise and their knowledge. So we've seen in the past, I think back in the days at the league, we've seen that many of the performance staff was quite reluctant to integrate data into their workflows. But when we look at it now, they consistently use it. and it's quite clear that those teams that are able to integrate data, whether it's to prevent injuries or identify talents, it's clear that those teams have a competitive advantage. And I think this is what we will see now more and more on the business side of things. So it started a bit with so I make the um, comparison with the performance side. But I think the human intuition will partner, I guess, more and more with AI, with the insights, and it's only a matter of time, I guess.
Do you also see this AI complementing more your role as a strategic advisor, as a technology advisor, as a consultancy agency, or industry analysts, not replacing it but augmenting it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. This is why we partner, right? With Trendtracker, I think we see clearly the benefit because what we do for clients is often around identifying those trends, identifying new technologies, startups in the market, and we use AI to kind of support that analysis. I think we put a layer on top of it. We contextualize, I guess, to the specificities of sports, but still, I think the bigger market trends and seeing the early signs, flagging signs in trends for the years to come, I think is definitely something that helps us and that gives us a bit of an edge towards the market, and that's definitely a benefit.
Maybe to go a little bit broader and zoom in on the AI aspect of things, I think it might be interesting also for our audience if you can just give one cool example that you've seen out there, whether it's leagues, clubs, or federations that use AI to stay ahead of industry shifts, whether it's could be fan engagement, ticketing, sponsorship, gamification. You probably have some tangible examples that you could share with us.
Yeah, I mean, although it's still, like I said, it's very early days, so there's one difference between many applications around um, AI itself inside of sports, where I'm not talking specifically around strategic intelligence. So there's many applications, and we've spoken about some of them in sports of AI. I think when it comes to strategic intelligence and how AI is leveraged there, I think we're in the early days. We do work with some bigger federations in sports and football, where we really help them to landscape and to look at what the trends, which trends are relevant for their specific context, and how they can then anticipate this. And this is very much, and there's a difference a bit between trends, I think, and new technologies, but they kind of overlap in many instances. So when we look at, for example, localization as one of the trends in the market, um, the need for bigger organizations and leagues to kind of localize their content to specific audiences. We see that technologies like speech to speech help finding solutions to this trend, right? So this is kind of filling a need, and that's the kind of interaction between trends and technology. We currently, I said it, we work with CanBI. They now work since a couple of weeks. They work with the LFP, the French Football League, and the French Football League will leverage their technology, provide live translations of their content in 150 languages across the globe, which obviously then kind of is an answer to the trend of localization and the need for specific territories or audiences to get content in their own language. So that's I guess a bit of link between technology and the trend itself.
Right? Really cool. Next to localization, if you're talking to these clubs and these leagues, what are like the top trends that you see in football and that they should be monitoring closely in their space?
Yeah, again, related to media rights, because this is a bit close to what I do in sports. I guess there's a couple of trends that we now see, which are, for example, the kind of increased fragmentation of media rights, which means that uh, fans see content on multiple channels, subscriptions, and so on. So because of the model of trying to optimize the value of media rights, rights have been traditionally packaged in many different to many sold to many different providers, offering the content in different subscriptions, which causes, I think, with those fans some sort of what we call subscription fatigue. So it's too fragmented. So that's a trend that we see. And now, as an answer to this trend, I think consolidation of content will be something that will be coming in the next couple of years, more and more. We obviously also see fan migration from digital and to digital and streaming platforms, increased demand of personalized fan engagement, and so on. But I think these are trends we currently see already. I mean, this is already happening now. And what is more difficult is looking at the longer term future, right? And this is something. I mean, when you look at technologies, AI is one, but then you also have quantum computing, which is becoming increasingly present. And yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question, but I guess it's somehow yeah. I hope it answers the question.
Yeah, sure. I think you elaborated on a couple of these trends that are probably really hot topics today. And indeed, it's all about not understanding what's happening today or even tomorrow, but anticipate what will come in the longer term. So really spotting these weak signals of potential change. I think this is really for me then where AI can have a lot of value. But maybe if I would come back to LaSource itself and the concept of AI-driven insights. Of course, there is a saying, eat your own dog food. Did you find some AI driven insights leveraging our platform or others that significantly influenced a strategic decision that you've made at LaSource yourself?
Phew, that's a big one, a big one, right? I need to think a little bit about this one.
Okay, let's take that offline because for me it would be interesting to see. Indeed, indeed. All right. So whenever you talk about AI, whenever you talk about tech, in most industries and even at a regulatory environment, data, privacy, ethical AI, ethical considerations, transparency in AI are also some of these trends that are really, yeah, maturing, emerging, and influencing how companies can leverage these kinds of technologies. Do you also see that happening in football or sports in general, that these kinds of challenges are arising?
Certainly, I mean, obviously, the more data you process, the more important the topic of data processing, GDPR, and all of these topics kind of become. I think it's a huge topic overall. I'm not a GDPR expert or not a data processing expert, but we do see it uh, as very important on the market. So I couldn't say that I know or that I have specific applications here, but it is something that, for example, when we work with some of our tech client, it's something that they are quite conscious about. So we work, for example, we know companies that do what you call clean data clean rooms, where they match the overlap um, of data of consumer data that a brand has on the one hand and a sports organization has on the other hand. So they map kind of the overlap, and if those two do a sponsorship campaign, they match then afterwards again whether the impact of the campaign was successful by seeing if the overlap in consumers has grown. Obviously, those type of solutions are very much linked to data privacy. And I think in terms of maturity at the sports organizations, this is something that they will also bring up themselves. I think a couple of years ago, data privacy was not necessarily something that they were concerned about. I think now it's most often at the beginning of the conversation, at the beginning of negotiations. So I think on the tech side, you would need to have answers, and it goes without saying, but you would need to have these answers prepared from the get-go, because they will be challenged on the topic.
Well, I can imagine indeed that sports or football organizations that have all kinds of data, whether it's from their players or fans or in general business operations. I think the same kind of considerations are in place than what we see happening across industry, basically. But maybe to leave this topic a little bit aside and talk about more about our collaboration. We know each other quite some time now. We started talking during your time at Pro League. You then changed to LaSource. I know LaSource is at the center of some of the major innovations happening in sports and football. I know you early on we detected like there is a win-win in collaborating between a consulting agency and an AI-driven platform like Trendtracker. But I would like to hear it from you. How do you see this collaboration? Why is Trendtracker really for you something that can be a win-win in your service portfolio?
I mean, it was a very natural kind of way of collaboration, right? I think like you said, we've been speaking for quite a time, and quite naturally we saw the added value of kind of combining the technology that Trendtracker offers, with the kind of contextual layer that we have and the expertise that we have in a specific area of sport. So we have been for the past couple of years advising our clients on strategy topics, right? But one of the increasingly important topics is, I think, how do you longer term strategize, and how do you create new business models, revenues, and this has kind of led to an increasingly kind of present consciousness with the organizations we work with, that they would need to think longer term. I think this is something that has become more and more important, and so we work with those clients on the longer term roadmap around technology, strategy, business models. And then only naturally, right, it comes with how do you spot trends in those years to come. So this is very, very natural. Trendtracker then helps us objectify, spot those, like you said, those early warnings, because I think this is a bit where we obviously know the context of sport. We know where the market is headed, I think, midterm. I think what you help us to achieve for our clients is looking longer term and spotting those early warning signs, those red flags, green flags, identifying whether it's a hype or a fad, and looking at that. And I think we can also not pretend that we know everything. There's many things. You look at different industries. We can learn from banking industry to even other territories, US, Asia. I think this is something that the platforms enables us to do, so we make sure that we don't miss anything. And then when we look at the longer term trends, we connect them to what we see happening on the market. I think that's a very, very powerful type of collaboration to have. And again, it gives us a bit of an angle. It gives us a bit of an edge. I think that's exactly what it's meant to do.
So yeah, I would perceive you really as one of those early adopters that is playing around with AI, is playing around with what we bring, AI-driven insights. So you have a little bit of a head start. What I would like to know is, what would be your advice, whether it's a sports executive, a consultant in sports, or a general business strategist, about how they can start with really integrating this AI-driven kind of workflow and integrate that into your existing, let's say, processes?
testing, right? It's what you say, like we are early adopters. We often say to our clients that you don't necessarily need to be the first mover, but it's good to be the first follower to a certain extent. So I think we're happy to be first movers on some areas, and our clients can learn from this as well. But I think starting to play around with what the technology has to offer, learning from it, and just tweaking and improving your processes is very relevant. I think what we do a lot with sports organizations and tech, we kind of foster the partnerships where they establish kind of a proof of concept where they start to work with the technology at an early stage, and this is what the innovation departments usually do, or the strategic departments. So I think it's just the main kind of takeaway for me is to start doing it, start using it, whether it's AI intelligence platforms or AI agents to enhance your processes, all these kind of things. I think it's just getting ahead with it and taking the, like you say, the head start.
So, yeah, quite interesting. I was just thinking while you were contemplating on this, and maybe it's also a difficult question, I don't know, but you were talking prior to this on longer term and foresight capabilities. Let's say if you look at whether it's sports, media, entertainment, media rights, football, and if you would like to share like one major industry shift that you see happening, let's say between now, 5 or even 10 years in the future, that these companies need to prepare for. Not sure if you have any top of mind, but would be interesting to learn your perspective on this.
Ha. There's many, right? Longer term kind of shifts, I guess. A very obvious one um, that is popping up a lot now is everything which is related to kind of direct to consumer, and the whole kind of shift of business model from sports organizations into B2B to B2B2C or B2C even. I think this is something that we see as one big industry shift. I wouldn't necessarily say that it's that this is 10 years from now, so it's something that is kind of already starting now. And on the other hand, obviously, there's also with the maturing of the sports industry, we see lots of consolidation, and whether it's, and those are very specific to sports, but whether it's like how different data companies are now merging, how those data companies now work with sports organizations. On the other hand, everything which is media rights, we see that there's lots of consolidation happening, many mergers and acquisitions, not necessarily traditional ones, and I think this from a business perspective poses a challenge, I think, for sports organizations, because there will be less competition. Traditional revenues will decrease. So again, they will need to find new revenue streams along the way. So yeah, it is a very, I guess it is a very difficult, a difficult question, a difficult prediction to make. But I think consolidation is definitely something that will impact the way companies are structured and the way they kind of build their strategies in the next couple of years.
All right, it's really interesting. Maybe for our next section, I would like to ask you just some fire questions that you can just with one sentence try to answer, if you may. So my first question would be, next to longer term shifts, what would be your big bet for 2025 when it comes to trends? If you have to choose one that you advise to all these federations and leagues and companies.
I've said it before, right? Localized fan experience. I think this is something in a globalized world. We've seen globalization happening, but we've also seen now the need for a more localized approach. And I think technology is now enabling that. And in 2025, that will be something that is that will change the way sports is being perceived or seen.
Right. I think, yeah, also interesting for all kinds of companies to have that localization and the technology enabler for localization in PR and marketing and sales to really kick in there. Another completely different question. If you would have to name one book, what would be your favorite book?
I will stay in the uh, sports business area, right? So, Sports Perfect Storm, I think it's called, from Roger Mitchell, is um, is a really good one. Is a book I'm reading now for the second time, because it is a quite a yeah it's a very comprehensive kind of overview of where the market is headed, but it does it on a um, with a financial background, which is very, very interesting. And also in terms of foresight, I think this is something where financial investments, mergers, acquisitions, understanding those evolutions, I think of the financial market will help also to understand what is coming, and to predict the future to a certain extent. And the book is great in kind of breaking down how the financial markets impact sports.
Right? Should you advise it to me as a, let's say, not of a really a sports addict or a sports fan, especially not football or anything related to that?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I would. I mean, obviously, you would need to have some interest in sports and in finance, but it's a very, very good book. That, I mean, I'm not a financial person either, so it kind of it's a great way. It educates on the topic. So yeah, I would definitely recommend it to non-football fans or non-sports fans as well.
Right. Maybe I will look it up on Amazon and see if it's something for me. Now, I only have two questions more for you, and I hope they're not too difficult. One is, what would be the best kept secret in your industry, whether it's sports or football? Something that you would like to share with the audience?
It's not. There's many secrets in football. There's many secrets in sports, but maybe I will keep them for a book I will write afterwards or
Yeah,
something.
something that
But
you can share
yeah, it's difficult
as a
to
lawyer
share
or a
secrets
fast
that.
lawyer.
But I think, I don't know if it's not really a secret, but I guess the importance of um, the network in sports, and it kind of that is something that is really, really important. The importance of yeah. I'm struggling with this one a bit. I don't know if we can.
Let's have a beer over it.
Let's have a beer over it.
I
Yeah, but
always see you traveling all the time, so I can imagine that in sports or football, that networking, connecting to people physically instead of digitally is one of those
yeah,
things
more and more,
that
definitely.
keeps the
This is
industry
why.
tight and aligned.
Exactly, exactly. You summarize it way better than I do.
So yeah, maybe one last question. You talked about foresight, so really an advice to sports companies to also take that longer term into account. That would have been my final questions. Maybe you have some other kind of favorite advice that you give to strategy teams, innovation teams, or sports agencies. But what would that favorite advice be linked to the strategy of sports?
Huh. I guess very related to this. Maybe some of your other some others have said the same, but I think foresight beats hindsight is I guess a good one. And I think the import which relates obviously to the importance of anticipating trends and disruptions on the market. And I think one of those things that a strategy, and it's a typical kind of advice, right? But it's only as valuable as its deployment. On the other hand, what I've also experienced, I think, with lots of organizations is that strategy is undervalued, um, because lots of people that we speak to have a strategy in their mind, but it's not necessarily written down. It's not necessarily bought into by the entire organization. So lots of people, where we start in our exercise, and obviously we go from strategy to deployment. But I think in that first part, in that first phase, we see that lots of people already have a good idea on what the strategy should look like. But because of the kind of short-term priorities, they've never really written it down, broken it down, put it in a roadmap, and socialized it across the organization. And I think this is also something that I would recommend clients, or recommend leagues and clubs to start doing.
Right. I think it can be any advice for any kind of company. For that matter, if I make the connection with what I see happening in other kinds of industries, do you believe it's part of the size of these leagues or organizations or federations that some are more mature in this than others?
I think size is definitely a part of it, to be honest. You need to know that many clubs um, are small companies, right? Only have a handful of people. So I think size definitely has its importance. Other than that, there's also the mindset, and I mean, I've seen it often in sports. There's a distinction between the top five clubs and then the rest, and people tend to make that distinction based on the performance on the pitch. But we've seen lots of organizations or lots of clubs that might not yet thrive on the pitch, but when it comes to their maturity in terms of strategy, in terms of digital maturity, technological maturity, they can be outperforming the rest. So it's not black or white, I would say. But obviously size does matter in this case. But there's also the smaller, nimble ones that are ambitious, and that can innovate. In sports, there's now what we call the squeezed middle, which are those kind of mid-size organizations and leagues that risk being squeezed between the big organizations. And what we try to tell them is that often they are not too big to fail, but they're also of a size that allows them to be nimble, to innovate, so they can take that kind of competitive advantage. So yeah, that's I guess I think the size being big can also make you unable to really change things, innovate, and you're more relying on legacy solutions, I guess.
All right, Leander, I think I've learned things that I didn't know. It was quite an insightful conversation about not only AI, but also AI-powered strategic intelligence, sports strategy, and how it clearly is augmenting or helping reshaping football, not just performance or pitch wise, but also business strategy wise, or even localization, like you mentioned, or fan engagement sponsorships. So thank you for that, Leander. But maybe for the audience, if people would like to follow the work of LaSource, where can they go to?
Our website obviously is lasource.io, and we have a newsletter. We have a podcast as well, which is related specifically to the business of sports. So yeah, or drop us a follow on LinkedIn or any other channel.
All right. So my final closing then for the audience would be thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening to the Strategy Show. I hope that you will subscribe for more insights on how AI is transforming strategy insights industries. So hope to see you soon for another episode.